our former commissioners. Good to have you here, Jared. So, yeah. I guess with that, let me get my presentation pulled up, and we'll start on that. I got some of the instructions. I think you got to share first. Share, and then do that. Slideshow. All right. Yep. Welcome to our winter big game meeting. Like I mentioned, I'm Luke Meduna. We'll go through some quick Zoom housekeeping stuff here. If you're not familiar with Zoom, the mute, unmute button and the video is down in that lower corner. You don't necessarily have to have your video up. A lot of times we know that helps if you're dealing with bandwidth issues. If you turn off your video, that helps. And we'll try to keep everybody muted just through the at least the first part. That we'll use the chat a lot. That works real well to enter questions and stuff like that that pop up, or if we need to communicate something to the group that way, or if there's somebody sees something, we can go through the chat, and that's where it's at. You hit that button, it'll pop up over there. You type in that bottom section. If you need to change the view, if it's stuck on spotlight, if you don't want to look at my face the whole time, later on you can change it to just the tiled view where you see everybody. But right now, while I'm sharing, it should be just the instructions here on the screen for you. So our basic meeting format here, our primary focus is big game, deer, whitetails, and muleys, elk, pronghorn, turkeys, and bighorn sheep. I have a quick slideshow. I put it in parentheses because it's about 50 slides long. Covered a lot of questions that typically pop up. So I'm going to try to hurry through that a fair amount. And then we'll make time for some of your questions and comments. Ultimately, this is your meeting. We want to hear from you, but we also want to share a lot of our info that we get throughout the year. So we really appreciate everybody attending and sharing info for us, or sharing info with us and listening as well. We have one basic rule here: just be respectful. I'll do my best to answer every question that comes up. We'll sit here as long as it takes. But just please be respectful. There's a lot of people that put a lot of work into this. The chat, it's a great place and that's where we want to put your questions and comments. Everything that goes into that chat will be included in the meeting notes that get sent to our all of our staff, administration, and commissioners. And it really helps us out if you start it with question or comment, so we know whether or not it's if it's something that's needing an answer, or whether it's just a comment you want us to hear. Or if sometimes it's not always a great way to explain something written like that. If you want to just say something, let us know, and you can unmute and we can take your comment verbally like that. I am recording the meeting. It's more than likely this will be the one I think that will be posted on YouTube and get shared through our social media. Let's see. I do have an attendee survey. If you can help us out, we'll take a couple minutes. And if you can give us some of the answers on this, it just helps us understand who's attending this. So go ahead and submit, who it is that you are and all that. And like I said, we'll take a couple minutes and move on. The one thing about the chat there, questions and comments, you might wait a little bit, at least towards the middle or end of my presentation here, before submitting comments or questions. I'm going to go through a lot of the common deer questions, that we get in there, and I'll probably have some of those answers for you, just so we don't double up on some of that. If there's some things that you still would like to hear me clarify or discuss a little more, you can bring it up, but just hold off on throwing all your comments in there initially, because I'm sure I'll cover some of that. So. But anyway, we'll looks like we're starting to taper off. If you want to fill out the poll, we'll give you another another 15 seconds, we'll say. We'll end it at a minute and a half. So. All right. Last call. I just picked up 2 more. All right. It means it tells me I need to wait just a second. All right. We'll close it up. There. All right. We'll keep moving. We gotta. Yeah. Clear all drawings. Figure out how to turn that annotation off. Disable annotation there. All right. We don't have to worry about that. That's easy to do. We've had that pop up. All right. Come on. All right. Just to start out with, our overall big game management goal in the state that we've stated in a lot of our documents that we put out there is to manage big game populations at levels consistent with social and biological carrying capacities and provide opportunities for aesthetic enjoyment in hunting. So our decision making and process, the input that we get throughout the year is landowners, meetings, and surveys. We spend a lot of time talking to them, getting their input. We also get a lot of input from our hunters, meetings and surveys, like this one. We also talk to the general public if there's issues that pop up that outside hunters and landowners that we'll try to address, as well as the biology. Look at age structure, age and sex ratios, calf production, things like that. We also do research looking at survival. Many of those things. We also look at disease and parasites that may impact any one of the species that we deal with, as well as the hunting season results. That's a lot of what I'll go through tonight. Hang on just a second. And just for reference, our agency, we have 4 administrative districts. You can see in that bottom map. You can see how that references to our deer units that most people are fairly familiar with. We got the Northwest, Southwest, Northeast, and Southeast. Different parts of the state that deal with. In the Northwest, you have the Alliance office. That would be the office that a lot of our staff, or that's the office you'd call. Same in North Platte. For the Southwest, Northeast, our district office is out of Norfolk, and then in the Southeast, it's out of Lincoln. First thing off, we'll talk about turkeys. Overall, our turkey trend is down 43% from the peak in 2009. You can see this map that actually the Omaha World Herald put together, and I stole from them because it's a pretty good one. But it's got our rural mail carrier survey with some other highlights, and you can see how those numbers have declined over the years and some of the major events that happened through that time. The brood survey that we started back up in 2019, the total number of birds we classified just shy of, or is just over 9,000 of them. This past year, we've invited the public to participate. We've had a lot of public participation in it. It's been great. Gets everybody involved in it. So it's been a great success. The results of it have been good. They're comparable to our years previous in the late 90s and early 2000s when we quit doing it. Both in our poults per brood and poults per hen, as well as the toms per hen and hens with and without broods. That hens without or with broods is a surrogate for nest success. So if you have a poor year of nest success, you're going to have a lot more hens that don't have broods in that data. And you can see how it's a little bit variable over the years, but fairly consistent in these last few years has been pretty good. But it's all been comparable to historic data. Overall, we're looking at some changes for 2023. So one of the big things, we're going to have mandatory telecheck for turkeys. For turkey harvest, you'll report it just like we do with deer. You can either do it through the website or the 800 number. The other big thing is a daily bag limit of 1 per day, so you can only harvest 1 bird per day. And that's just it's a technique used by a lot of states to try to reduce the overall tom harvest. We're also reducing the personal limit from 3 down to 2 permits per person, and a non-resident cap of 10,000 permits. For the fall, we're again mandatory telecheck, and then a limit of 1 permit, and that in each one of those permits is a bag limit of 1 turkey. So we're effectively going from a total bag limit of 4 down to 1, although there's not a lot of people that we're harvesting 4, or even buying 2 permits. So yeah, it's just reducing down to 1 there. The season dates, we're cutting the season down significantly. Season will be open October 1st to November 30th. I guess I should also say that we are in the process of launching a turkey research project that'll be up and running here in the next month or so. In the Southwest and Northwest, we're capturing a bunch of turkeys and putting collars on them, and gonna follow them. It's 3 years of research followed by a couple more years of analysis there. So right now it's a 5-year project with a total of 3 different students, 2 PhDs and a master's student on it. So in 5 years, we're gonna know a lot more about turkeys in Nebraska than we know right now. So we're all looking forward to that. We'll move on to deer and give you an overview of our 2022 firearm season. Overall, we had just over 34,000 deer checked. That's down 8% from 2021 and 19% from our 5-year average. We're about 37,000 last year, and typically the previous 5 years we've been right around 40 to 43,000. So definitely down this year. The annual fluctuation we typically get 2.5% or so, up and down. Yeah, last year we did see a 12% decline last year. Let's see. So on the mule deer, our harvest was down. Mule deer buck was down 10% from a year ago and 30% from the 5-year average. Antlerless harvest down 12% and down 28% from the 5-year average. And some of the antlerless harvest is because we'd actually cut permits there as well, but we're also seeing declines in those populations that we started making those cuts last year. Whitetail harvest, buck harvest was down 12% from last year and 20% from the 5-year average. Whitetail antlerless was actually pretty even from last year and down 7% from the 5-year average. And you can see those trends in the graphs over here. Our buck age structure in 2022, we aged just over 16,000 deer, which is 48% of the deer from our November firearm season that came through check stations. We didn't have any tooth data, as a reminder, from 2020 due to not operating check stations that year, but we still did get the yearling buck harvest. You can see how over time, 20 to 30%, back in 1990 of our harvest was 2 and older, meaning 70 to 80% of our harvest were made up of yearling bucks. That has completely flipped in the last 30 years to whereas, on our mule deer, we're at basically 10 to 15% of our harvest is yearling bucks, and nearly 50 or right around 50% of our harvest is actually bucks 3 and older. Whitetails are just a little lower than that. We've been about 22% yearling bucks and about 40%, hovering right around or just below 40% these last 3 or 4 years that have been 3 and older. We do utilize on those that we can't age that inside spread of greater than or less than 11 inches. Deer that are less than 11 inches are considered a yearling. Greater than is considered 2 or older. It just helps us separate those yearling bucks. That was actually done through research out of the University of Nebraska Kearney. I believe I saw Brian Peterson on here. He was the researcher that led that project and has assisted us with that. So it's been a great tool for us to discover that was a good metric to look at age structure for us. The special landowner deer season that we've had for 2 years now is a Saturday to Monday before the November firearm. The results this year, we did sell just over 3,000 permits, harvested just under 800 deer. You can see the breakdown between mule deer and whitetail there. The percentage of bucks versus antlerless is almost identical percentages to the statewide archery and youth, which what you'd expect for a single any deer permit. Falls right in those lines. It's not necessarily, more bucks or more does than any of those other standard permits. This year, we did see a 15% decline in permit sales and 13% decline in harvest from 2021. So it's kind of following some of that same trend. As you can see over in the table or in the graph here, the permit use of that special landowner season appears to be compensatory with our limited landowner permit, meaning that people aren't necessarily using that special landowner season to kill more deer. They're just using that season to kill a deer versus hunting during the November firearm. There's actually a really low percentage they're actually killing 2 bucks or 2 deer, deer on both the limited or the special landowner and the limited landowner permits. These percentages are fairly low. So for the most part, it's just taking place. They're just harvesting that weekend versus during the 9-day. So the overall impact is pretty minimal in that regard. We did test for CWD this year in those. Actually, I don't think we did it in the Sandhills, or maybe we did, but Todd might be able to correct me. But anyway, it says we sampled in 5 units. So far, getting some of the samples back, we've had about 194 positive of the 1,300 samples tested so far. Testing is still in progress, and we're in the process of notifying the hunters that have positive deer through both a email and a postcard that they're getting mailed. Elk, so far we've had 70 samples come back and we've had 1 positive, which is pretty consistent. Over the last several years when we've been testing elk, it's typically been between 1% and 2% come back positive. So relatively low in elk, moderately higher in deer. For EHD, we did have a handful of reports this year. Most of it was focused on the northeast part of the state, along with this drought that we had. In 2022, we had 158 deer reported compared to last year. We had 382. And by contrast, looking at 2012, when we had over 6,000 deer reported, and it's quite possible and likely that we're not getting quite as high of a percent reported. I see anecdotal reports from people on Facebook and other things that weren't likely reported as well. But those don't get recorded because we can't watch all of that. So there's probably some that don't get reported to us. But the last 2 years haven't been anywhere close to what we saw in 2012. They're significant these past couple of years, but not nearly as bad as what they were. And so, with that, we just remind people to, please call us if you find a suspected diseased deer, whether it's CWD or EHD, if those deer are near water, anything like that helps us out in searching for diseased, deer, or, things like reporting EHD. You people in the field are going to be our eyes and ears on that, and a huge help for us. Quick review of our 2022 deer hunter survey. It was an online survey sent to all deer hunters with a valid email. It was done in late May and early June this past year. We sent out 70,000 invitations, got 10,000 responses. So, I ask all sorts of questions on there about success and satisfaction, management units that people hunt, weapons that people hunt with, the land that people hunted on, and things like that. There'll be a full report coming out that you can find actually the last 2 years reports of that on our wildlife surveys page. They're the 2022 survey. I've just been a little bit behind and have not got that posted just yet. So hopefully I can finish that up soon, and we'll get that posted there soon. I'll go through a couple of the findings from last year. Our hunter satisfaction remains moderately high. It did drop a little bit last year from 2020. With a little bit lower numbers, that's somewhat to be expected. We did find that most hunters show a selection for buck antler size when presented with options. We did this same thing in the 2021 survey. We asked about whitetails. I showed it a number of bucks and asked whether or not people would shoot them. We did it for whitetails last year. We did it for mule deer this year. 81% of our hunters said they would pass the spike or the little fork. 41% passed the 4.2-year-old, 13% passed the 3.3 to 4-year-old, and less than 3% passed those mature bucks, which tells me that we have about 3% that are liars, because nobody should pass either one of those deer. What we did find is that hunters are less selective for mule deer than they are for whitetail, meaning though they're more apt to shoot a younger deer when it comes to a mule deer than the whitetails. So that's one of the interesting findings there. Like I said, there'll be another survey coming out. It'll get that'll get sent out probably April or May sometime when we get around to it. And if you want to see those previous ones, you can sure look at our wildlife surveys page. Sorry, distracted with a couple things here. All right, I'll move on to some of our common deer questions. Hopefully I can tackle some of the questions that might pop up there in the chat. Here, a lot of it comes down to deer trophy quality. Hang on.
Want to get an echo?
There. Sorry about that. We'll just try to keep everybody muted. Yeah, a lot of the questions come down to deer trophy quality, and it's, if we only did X, we'd be just like Iowa and Kansas. Like there's a certain formula that makes Iowa. And we'll get into some of that. Most commonly that question is if we only move the firearm season in November. But I'll point out there's more to buck quality than season dates. When they get harvested really doesn't matter in the long run. It's really the comparisons to Iowa and Kansas are easy because they're right next door. But there's a lot of contributing factors that go into that. The number of buck harvest, or how high the buck harvest is, number of hunters, hunter density, and probably the most important part is the habitat above and below ground. Even topography plays a role in that. Also, the other part of that, the big part of that is the culture. Whether or not people are used to or desire to pass deer is a big part. And it's quite possible that season structure does play a little bit into that. When deer susceptible, but there's a lot of states that also have seasons very similar to ours that produce at the same rate. Oh, come on. So the question, about having a rifle during the rut, you can see the list of the states. Like I said, there are a lot of states that have seasons just like ours: Indiana, Kentucky, Minnesota, Missouri, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin. They have a lot of states hunt during the rut. Why is that for us? It's tradition. Ironically, we actually started out with a December season in the 50s, and right around 1960, I believe, our hunters asked us to move the season to November because they felt that largely back then they were buck only seasons, and people didn't like hunting worn down bucks, and so we moved the season. We actually, back then, we used to take about 30 different measurements at the check station, and we weighed bucks, and lo and behold, they weighed 7% more when we moved our season to November. They're higher fat content, and we had happy hunters. Largely, rifle hunting during the rut, man, the rut is the best time to hunt. The rut is fun. You got deer moving. It makes it entertaining for everybody. You look at our archery hunters, and about 50% of our archery whitetail buck harvest happens in the first 15 days of November every year. So our archery hunters show that that's a great time to be out in this out there as well. It's definitely enjoyable. The weather's plays another role in it. It's about 10 degrees colder in December, like 3.5 weeks later. That temperature really starts dropping, and you saw what we had this December. We had some severe cold there in mid-December that would have made any hunting seasons pretty tough. It's also arguably safer, if the deer aren't moving, or during a rut hunt, just sitting still and sitting somewhere is a good plan, because the deer are going to move. You sit there long enough and deer are going to move. If you're in a good pinch point or something like that, the deer are going to move across in front of you. One of the issues they see over in Iowa, with a season in December is if the deer aren't moving, the hunters will do things to get the deer to move, which largely includes, drives and trying to push, blocks of timber and pushing habitat like that. And when you do that, you put hunters out in front of guns, and they tend to have a lot more hunting accidents than we do. So that's, another one of the considerations as well. Ultimately, it's not a biological decision for us. Our fawn production is good. Our buck age structure is comparable to other Midwest states. And I think I talked about that on another slide, but our yearling buck harvest is as good as any of the other Midwest states. Kentucky and Indiana are slightly ahead of us at about 20 and 18%. The other thing to think about too is our western half of the state mule deer rut typically happens on the winter range in the western United States. That they're already headed towards winter range by the time the rut happens, and they actually have their seasons prior to the rut because of those issues, and they tend not to hunt deer on winter range, or they have very limited hunting on winter range. So it's a little different for us, having both whitetail and mule deer. And ultimately the when you hunt the bucks isn't as important as the number of bucks you harvest. The other thing to look at too is farm success rates are only marginally different in Iowa, at 33% versus 38 to 41%. So it's not a huge difference for our firearm season. And they're doing that with limited shotgun slug guns and limited straight wall cartridges, versus the high power guns that we have. So success is only marginally different. The other consideration too is that states with a December season have a much higher archery harvest as a percent. In Iowa, they have 60,000 archers, which is 40% of their hunters and 20% of their harvest. Kansas, they don't know how many archers they actually have, but archery has 40% of their harvest. Ohio they're 47% of their harvest. Minnesota, who's similar to us, has 109,000 archers, which is 14% of their hunters, but it is only 14% of their harvest. Nebraska, we have 20 to 22,000 archers, and it's 12% of our harvest. So those states, when you start push rifle hunters out of the rut, they're probably going to join back into the rut, because like I said, it's a great time to hunt. So it would crowd. It wouldn't be an automatic. I mean, if you think the archery season would be crowded, now it would get a lot more crowded if you kick the firearm hunters out. The other thing too is we've talked to our hunters in the 2020 deer hunter survey. We asked our hunters when they wanted the firearm season. 71% said they wanted it to stay the same. They didn't want the season dates changed. And if you look at the weapons preference, even the archers were at 55% didn't want it changed. So not even archers were a majority wanted it changed. And we had, like I said, there were almost 14,000 respondents to that question there. So it's not a small sample size at all. Of those that wanted it changed, we asked when they wanted it. You can see how that breaks down. 43% actually wanted it earlier in the year, and 57% wanted it later. So when it breaks down, 71% of our hunters wanted it to stay the same, 12% wanted it earlier in the season, and 17% wanted it later. So it's a pretty large majority there that don't want it later, but that do want it to stay where it is. So that's kind of where we're at on that, ultimately. So another question that pops up is antler restrictions, and why we don't use them. Largely, they're not necessary. Antler restrictions generally only protect some of the yearling bucks. Like I mentioned, 22% of our whitetails and 10% of our mule deer buck harvest is yearlings. I did mention that UNK research showed that a third of our bucks have 4+ points, a third have 3 points. So if we went with a 3-point rule, it'd only protect a third of our yearling bucks, and it would ultimately only protect about 7% of our harvest. Antler restrictions also adds complications to the season, and an unnecessary rule for hunters to accidentally break. That's what they saw a lot in the West when they used to do some of these, is you get some high grading where people shoot a deer thinking it's a legal deer, walk up to it, realize it's not a legal deer, and walk away from it. So that's, one of the reasons that we just don't want to add more complications to our hunters. I mean, for one, we're a conservative state. Nobody likes Nobody likes government telling them what they can and can't do. They do work in the South, partly because or largely because it's easier to separate young bucks. The other part of it is they've got heavier cover and closer shots. In the South, they've got much more timber. Finding a place to shoot 200 yards in a lot of the South is going to be a little tougher. That's the norm for a lot of firearm hunting here, especially on the mule deer range. As you can see, our yearling buck harvest, or the yearling buck harvest in other Midwest states, and this is all from the National Deer Association deer report. But Illinois, they're 37 to 40% yearling bucks. Indiana is 18 to 25. Kentucky 22%, Michigan 34%, Missouri 24 to 35, Ohio's 39%, Wisconsin's 40 to 52%. Like I mentioned, we're at 22% on this. This is all whitetails here. And Iowa, Kansas, Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota don't actually collect age at harvest data, so they don't report there. But of those states that do report, and particularly the Midwest states, we rank right there towards the top. The other question we get is why 2 buck permits? And largely because it provides opportunity. We have both whitetail and mule deer in Nebraska. And it just provides opportunity for people to be able to harvest, or hunt both of those if they so desire. And ultimately we have relatively low hunter numbers compared to a lot of states. It does have relatively low impact. About 20% of residents and 10% of non-residents actually purchase 2 buck permits. About 2.5% of residents and non-resident hunters actually kill 2 bucks. So it ends up being about 2,500 additional bucks killed statewide. It's about 7% of our buck harvest. It's a pretty low impact. When you break that down, it comes down to about 3 bucks per 100 square miles. I'm not sure we'd really notice if we got rid of that or not. It'd take quite a while, and you really can't stockpile bucks all that well. So in those harvest rates would equate to a 1.5% change in survival based upon other buck studies. Looking at some of the stuff that Kansas has done, if you it would basically change their survival from like 55 to 56.5% if you got rid of that harvest, or if Kansas went to a 2 buck harvest and had the same rates that we did. So ultimately, it comes down to the cost benefit. We're harvesting 7% more of our bucks for double the opportunity, which is a pretty fair trade in my opinion there. There's always social considerations, hunter desires, in that high end management where people want to manage for bucks. They're free to do what they want. One of the complaints I've actually had from people in Kansas, or heard from people in Kansas where they're limited to 1 buck, is that if they're on a heavily managed property, it's hard to find people to take some of those management bucks, those older bucks that aren't going to grow into a trophy deer. There's not many people that want to harvest those. So this provides that opportunity if that's an area that people want to end up doing in their management system. We'll take a look at some of our whitetail states. This is where we rank among the Boone and Crockett entries from 2007 to 2020. We had a total of 12, or averaged just under 12 per year. You can see where we rank among the Midwest states. Wisconsin, leads everybody at 63 per year. We're at 11.3 over that time frame. You can see that list there. But when you start looking at the overall whitetail buck harvest, Michigan and Wisconsin also harvests 5 times as many whitetail bucks as we do. Michigan harvests 7 times as many whitetail bucks as we do. And Kansas and Iowa are about half again more than what we do. So when you look at that whitetail buck harvest density, we harvest 0.4 per square mile. Wisconsin is 2.3, Michigan's 2.2. Again, they're harvesting deer at 4 or 5 times the rate we are. Iowa's basically twice the harvest density that we are. Kansas is about 25% higher. Illinois, Indiana are 3 to 4 times as high as we are. When you look at the total number of deer hunters, We had average about these are all from 2016 when we had consistent data set from all the hunters or all the states. And so you can see how we've got significantly fewer hunters than a lot of those other states. I mean, Texas has got over 700,000, Pennsylvania's about 700,000, Wisconsin, Minnesota are 600,000. So 6 and 7 and almost 10 times as many hunters as we do. So you look at that hunter density, we've got about 1.2 hunters per square mile. You look at Pennsylvania and it's over 15 hunters per square mile statewide. Wisconsin's almost 12, Kentucky at 8.8. Yeah, Illinois, Indiana over 5, Kansas slightly higher than we are. Iowa's more than twice the hunter density that we are. You look at the public lands, you can see how you know how crowded our public lands might be compared to other states. If you take the overall number of hunters that each state has and the square miles of public lands, we've got about 43 hunters statewide per square mile of public land. Obviously not everybody hunts public land, but if everybody did, that's how dense it would be. In Ohio, there would be 239 hunters on every square mile of public land. Indiana and Iowa are over 100. Kansas is about twice what we are at 74. So while we don't have a lot of public land, we're pretty fortunate that it could definitely be worse. So yeah, that's just a zoom in of that. Filter out Rhode Island and Ohio, just to see how that we compare in there. South Dakota is pretty fortunate at 10. About 30% of South Dakota is public land, and they've got a fairly similar number of hunters as we do, but a lot more public land. So when it comes down to it, you know, the fair comparison for the Boone and Crockett entry is looking at the number of whitetail bucks harvested per Boone and Crockett entry. I guess we should all be fortunate we don't live in South Carolina or Florida. Florida has never had a Boone and Crockett entry. South Carolina, I believe, has had 2. Over those 14 years, South Carolina averages one Boone and Crockett entry for every 750,000 deer harvest or bucks harvested. As you zoom in a little bit, there's a lot of states in that 25 to 30,000 range: West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, New York, Georgia. They don't shoot very many Boone and Crockett deer per buck harvested. Zoom in a little further, you can see where we rank. We rank, what's the count there? So we're at 8th out of the whitetail states. Indiana actually leads everybody. 1 Boone and Crockett for every 1,200. And 17 bucks. Iowa and Kansas aren't terribly far behind. We harvest Boone and Crockett at about half the rate at what those states do. We're pretty comparable to Wisconsin, who actually, when it's on a volume basis, leads everybody, as we saw on the graph earlier. We harvest about twice the rate at South Dakota. So we actually fare pretty well, about 3 times the rate of what even Oklahoma does. So. And a lot of that has to do with the habitat. You look at the habitat that we have. One of the comments I get is we should manage for more deer. That's really pretty hard given that a lot of the habitat that we have, given the ag and the lack of good whitetail habitat that we have. We got to remember half of our state is pronghorn habitat. So. Move through this, you can see our square miles of woodland timber is we're second to last, only ahead of North Dakota when you're looking at square miles. As a percent, we are last at 3.2% of the state is actually timber. Yeah, Michigan's over 50%. Even Iowa is 8%. Kansas is 5%. When you look at the 3 states, again, I'm just comparing these because they're the ones we always get compared to. You can see some of the differences there, Nebraska and the breakdown of the percentage of crops and woodland and grassland there. Some of that hay pasture is actually more CRP type of ground that we don't have a ton of in the state. A lot of that brown is native grass, or the light brown, I should say. That dark brown is all the farmed. And you can kind of see some of the topography differences. It doesn't really pop up real well at this scale. But looking at some of these on a county by county basis real quick, Monroe County, Iowa, South Central Iowa is one of the better kind of dead center of their great whitetail habitat. Pawnee County and Howard County, Nebraska, over on the left-hand side are arguably two of our better areas of, or at least our higher densities of deer and deer habitat in the state, and they look nothing like what Iowa does. Pawnee County kind of comes close with the timber we've got, but we're still 12% woodland there versus 28% in Monroe County, Iowa. The same for Jefferson County, Kansas. You can see how broken a lot of that country is, and that topography aids in creating just escape cover for whitetails so they can survive to an older age class. Again, Butler County, Kansas and South Central Kansas is more open, but you can see all those little fingers of timber. That topography, it's just broken enough where it aids in that and gives them escape cover. If you've ever get the chance to drive through Pike County, Illinois, I've been through there once, and you can see exactly why that's kind of a mecca for deer habitat. It's very broken. Lots of little fingers of timber going everywhere. Same with Buffalo County, Wisconsin. That is the place, the highest producing Boone and Crockett County in the nation, and you can see how that's broken and just a lot of edge habitat. It's just perfect for whitetail habitat. And so to dive into what makes Kansas, Kansas and Iowa, Iowa, a lot of it's that habitat. They have a lot more permanent cover than we do. They don't have a ton, but it's enough. It also comes down to that edge. A lot of our habitat is very linear along our riparian corridors, our rivers. Whereas when you get the deer habitat in the broken hills, you get a lot more edge per area of or per square mile of timber, and it's perfect. It's exactly what whitetails want. That goes along with that topography and all that. They also have a culture. Passing deer is the norm. It is increasingly common in Nebraska. You saw our age structure, how that's changed over the years. More people are realizing that, if I let him go, he can grow, or just by, if I kill him this year, he's not going to be alive next year for sure. They also have, higher deer numbers are more acceptable in Kansas and Iowa. They do have depredation issues and issue kill permits. But it's one of those things where they're just a little more tolerable and willing to manage for higher numbers of deer to actually manage for deer in those states. They also have, we just have, different hunter densities and habitat variables that play into all of that as well. And I should also add that their firearm season dates weren't picked for management reasons. They were picked long ago. I've talked to their biologists, and they picked those firearm seasons when the crop harvest would be over. Like I mentioned, our first seasons were actually in December, but we moved them to November at the request of hunters. And in the end, each state is a result of their own long-term experiment in deer management to see what works for each state. There's no perfect formula. There's all, we all have social considerations that outweigh biology. There's reasons we all do what we do and do it differently. And show some of the differences between the states here. For one, I mentioned a little bit about half of our state being pronghorn habitat, but you look at our mule deer harvest in the state, and we usually, harvest, about 4 times as many mule deer as what Kansas does. Pronghorn, we harvest probably 5 times as many pronghorn as Kansas. Their pronghorn range is really limited. You can see, about half of our state we've got pronghorn in. And elk harvest, we harvest 10 times more elk than Kansas does at this point. They've got a couple small elk herds. We've got elk spread across the state. Iowa has none of those, at least none of those regularly. I think every time they get an elk or a mule deer, it ends up on Facebook in Iowa, so they're pretty rare. And neither of those states have bighorn sheep. And like I said, ultimately, we're all a result of the natural resources that we're blessed with, combined with the people and social tolerances within each state. I'm trying to say, what the people want in each of those states is kind of directs the direction that management goes. So it's not a simple formula. It's complicated to separate all that. I guess if you're looking for better deer, I've got a few suggestions here. Deer quality is a culmination of individual choices. You control your own trigger. Like I said, if let him go, he can grow. If you want to see bigger deer, don't shoot small deer. The other thing too is if your neighbor's happy shooting the deer that he's shooting, let him be happy with his deer. If they aren't happy, if they're complaining about all the small deer around, remind them that but politely remind them if you let him go, he can grow. Work with your neighbors. If you share common goals in that regard. And also work with the private landowners to see how you can help them hold more deer. Deer cause damage that's not going to go away. We can't, there's no way that we can force landowners to sustain damage just because we want more deer. We've got to figure out ways to work with landowners to solve their problems and balance the desires of landowners and hunters. And everything that an individual hunter can do to work with an individual landowner to try to better the deer in your area, that'll go a long ways. That's more than what we can do, especially in a state that's 97% privately owned. A few things to remember. TV deer are fake, and I put fake in parentheses. Obviously they're real deer, but all the deer you see taken on TV, they're there because A, they're trying to sell something. B, nobody wants it's all about getting eyes to watch, and so nobody's going to watch people shoot average deer, and so it's all got to be big deer. And they're all in highly managed areas. So that's, if they're hunting in Iowa or Kansas or, Kentucky, wherever, those deer that show up on TV are there for a reason. And producing good deer takes work. It's a lot of effort for people. There's people in Nebraska that manage their ground heavily, and it takes a lot of work to do so to kill decent deer, and it doesn't change whether it's in Nebraska or Iowa or anywhere. Don't be a jerk when you're talking to people about what they shoot. That doesn't help anybody. You're not going to win people over by ridiculing what they shoot. Let people be happy. And ultimately, this is all supposed to be fun. Deer hunting is fun. It's one of my favorite pastimes to do. I love it. If you're not having fun, you need to reevaluate, why you're doing what you're doing. The other question we get on our non-resident side, our non-resident permit price often comes up. Our max for that is set in statute at $284. We're at $282 right now, so we're effectively at our max. We're actually in the process of working towards increasing that. We have to work with the legislature to get that changed. But when we do increase permit prices on non-residents, we've got to follow that statutory criteria. Like I mentioned, the max, we can't go any higher than what the legislature lets us go to, but also on a rate of increase. We can't increase more than 6% per year, or if we haven't increased in over 3 years, we can go up a max of 18%. So we are limited. We can't automatically bump it to $600 like some people would like us to do. So there's a process for all that. We are lower than Kansas and Iowa, but we're higher than most of the rest of the whitetail states. We are lower than most of the mule deer states. We are higher than South Dakota and North Dakota, but most of them west of us, we are higher. Then as far as our non-resident permit numbers, we did establish this past year a non-resident quota for our either section buck only permits at 15,000. We will reevaluate that this next year. We were just a shade over 13,000, 13,400 or somewhere in that ballpark this year. So we'll look at that. I'm sure that there'll probably be some manner of reduction there, but we haven't really had much for discussion about that, but that's something we are looking at. The other comment I get is non-residents just shoot yearling bucks, which is not true based on our data. Actually, for mule deer, our non-residents and residents harvest yearling bucks at about the same rate. On whitetails, about 15% of non-resident harvest is yearling bucks, whereas for residents, about 25%. You can see those percentages for each of the last, I guess 5 out of the last 7 years are listed there. It's very consistent. Non-residents are typically about 10% higher than residents on the whitetail side. When it comes to 3.5-year-old deer, non-residents typically, about 50% of their harvest is 3.5 or older, whereas for residents, it's about 40%. When you break it down, the number of yearling bucks killed by residents versus non-residents take about 900 yearling bucks across the state, whereas residents take almost 6,000. So, when it comes down to it, for the most part, non-residents who are traveling here, coming to hunt quality deer, most of them aren't leaving home or leaving the, sorry, most of them, aren't going to go home with a yearling buck. There's a few that do, but largely it's a lot lower percentage than what our residents do. So, we'll move on from that, on to elk. Elk have seen increasing populations since the 1980s. They're a very charismatic species, man. Everybody in the state is excited to see elk. We've quickly gotten known for being able to produce very big bulls at very young ages. I haven't looked at, there's been a couple more 400-inch bulls, but the first 6 400-inch bulls that we had, the oldest one was 8. We had one of them that was 5, I think 2 or 6, and I can't remember the numbers, but they were all 5, 6, 7, or 8. Utah, for a lot of their trophy units, managed for an average age of 8. Our goal, we managed for an average age of 5, and I would argue we probably rival Utah in the quality on an average bull harvested, or per average bull harvested, across the states. So, and like I mentioned, everybody's excited to see elk. Our landowners, generally elk are met with enthusiasm until they aren't. Everybody loves seeing 3 and 5 and maybe 8 elk come over the hill. It's when they get to be 30 and 50 that everybody starts to, or the landowners really start to cringe, and it can turn into a mess in a hurry. A lot of that, they can cause major depredation issues, particularly in that corn and elk interface, where we've got pivots of corn and beans intermixed into elk habitat. You can see the damage that they can cause. This upper picture, they had actually hunted that pivot fairly hard, thought they had the elk moved out, didn't check it for a few weeks, and lo and behold, the elk came back and had done a fair amount of damage. So but you can see in each of those pictures, this lower one is beans. They do wallows and trails and do significant damage to them. So that's the complaints that we get from landowners. It's definitely not insignificant, and an issue that we definitely have to help them work through. Over the past years, we've had some permit increases. Historically, we've had pretty conservative quotas, and gradual increases up until the last couple years. Our harvest, very similar pattern. We've slow to increase those numbers, a little bit of annual variation. Overall, historically, we've had 78% success on our bull permits and 49% success on our cow permits. When you compare that to any elk hunt in the Western United States, is far better than what they see. 10 and 20 and 30% success. For our 2022 season, our permits, we did increase our antlerless permits another 20% this past year. Bull permits were basically even. We had to shift around with ended up being a 1% decrease with shifting around with the landowner quotas. Our harvest as of 12/8, I didn't update this at the end of the year, but our harvest as of 12/8 was 165 cows, which was a little behind where we were at the same time a year ago. Early success on the success on our early season permits was 51%. For bulls, we had 175 bulls harvested compared to almost 200 a year ago. Our bull harvest was definitely a little lower, but we still had a harvest success of 76%. Our goal there is to have a harvest of 70%. Last year it was 88%, if I remember correctly. The other thing big news we had this last year was our special depredation season. It was put in place to help address elk damage in an agricultural landscape there in Keith and Perkins County, southeast of Ogallala and south of Paxton. We had worked with the landowners and had been asked by the landowners to increase elk harvest, pressure on elk in that area. We'd harvested 17 total during the 3 previous elk seasons, through a lot of effort through our staff and those landowners trying to get hunters with those box elder permits to hunt over there. For this special depredation season, there was unlimited any elk permits. We sold a total of 208 to 176 hunters. It was largely a successful season. We harvested 8 at the beginning of the season. I said that if we actually harvested 10, I'd be amazed. We were pretty close to that. We had very few trespassing and safety issues that popped up. And ultimately this, the special depredation season allowed hunters to be a part of the solution rather than just handing out depredation or damage control permits to the landowners. So it helped help put 8 of those elk into the hands of hunters at that time. The concerns about wasted meat or anything like that was not an issue. Those hunters did a great job of salvaging and getting the meat cooled. We actually had a refrigerated trailer stationed at one of the farms over there. So if it was going to be needed, it was available. So again, it worked well. And again, ultimately it allowed our hunters to be a part of the solution. Looking forward to 2023, we'll evaluate our season in the coming weeks as our seasons come to a close. Our populations appear to be headed in the right direction. We're reducing those elk numbers. Our landowners have done a fantastic job of cooperating and allowing access. Those landowners that need harvest or have damage, they've been great to get hunters in and get cows and bulls harvested. We'll look at the bull quality metrics and adjust permits as necessary. One of the things that is coming up to put on your radar is we're looking at restructuring our elk units. In part to, right now we've got really big units. It's a highly desirable permit for everybody to have. And so some of these areas where we do have elk issues are typically areas of lower elk populations or where they've dispersed into some of these crop fields, which are a little bit tougher hunts. And generally people, when they've got a, once in a lifetime or one harvest in a lifetime on the bulls, people don't necessarily want to go hunt those sparser areas. So we're looking at restructuring some of our units just to move our hunters around. But we've got a video and input form that it should be released here fairly soon, that be plastered on our social media, where I go through all that. We won't go through that tonight. We'll also have a Zoom like this where people can all go through that, basically repeat that video and then take input that way. But yeah, watch your email, watch Facebook, our social media for your chance to look at that. That should be coming up here very soon. Quickly move on to pronghorn. We've actually got a research project that we've talked about here recently. It'll be wrapping up this spring. Over the course of the last 2 years, we've collared 110 pronghorn with GPS collars. So we've got lots of data on that. One of the neat things we found is we've had some seasonal movements of greater than 50 miles. We've had pronghorn that we collared north of Alliance. During the winter, they winter in the wheat fields or on the edges of the wheat fields there around Alliance and end up summering well into the sandhills over north of Mullen. So they're covering a lot of ground, and you can see we did collar around the western and southwestern periphery of the sandhills, and those pronghorn have moved a long ways from their summer to winter ranges. So it's been interesting. We'll get a lot more information when the grad student completes that. That'll get published, and I'm sure we'll share a lot of pretty maps here over the next coming years from results from that. Our season results, our firearm success rates and buck age were very similar to past years. Our archery success was down. Overall, our trend, our harvest and permits have increased in recent years due to depredation complaints and an increased population, over the past, 8 or 10 years. But, we're at a point now where our population on pronghorn is definitely down, or trending down. We did have a EHD event last year with our collared pronghorn where we had a fair number die last August and September when we were picking up some EHD, and so we had 11 of them, 9 or 11, I can't remember off the top of my head, that we confirmed that were EHD deaths, and 13 or maybe another 10 more that were suspect or something along those lines. So, moving into this next year, we're likely looking at an overall decrease in permits since our population is definitely trending down there. So I guess onto that, we'll take some time to go through your questions and comments. Let me close out of this and stop sharing and get back to this. So we will, yeah, if you got comments, throw them in the chat there and we will, we'll get to them. Hang on just a second. My chat doesn't neatly pin over to the corner. All right, let me get up to the top. All right, let's see. All right. Oh, Greg, I'll definitely read this compliment. Would like to say what good service I've gotten out of the team, out of the Alliance office. Thanks for sharing that, Greg. I know that, yeah, we got great staff out there. Clayback question. We've been losing 6 to 10% of our calf crops the past 3 years in the Niobrara Valley. Pastures, 50 to 60% timber with all the picture lions. I might have Sam. Sam, do you want to?
Yeah. Sure.
You want to chime in on that one?
Yep. I'm happy to provide some thoughts about that. I've been thinking about lions and lion season in the Niobrara Valley for probably a decade or so. So yeah, first off, we agree that the population in the Niobrara Valley has risen rapidly. It was only about 5 years ago that we got our first clear picture of a kitten in the Niobrara Valley on a trail camera over, I guess, sort of over by Valentine. We had a lot of habitat there in the Kippaha Bend of the Niobrara River that's perfect for lions, but we never had evidence of multiple reproducing females with pictures of kittens that were really clear until fairly recently. And they've really expanded in the last 5 years. We've been conducting surveys up there since 2010, trail camera or otherwise, and doing some collaring research since 2017, 2018, somewhere around there. We now have a full-time mountain lion research biologist in Valentine, Brad Nichols, if anyone's met him, a really knowledgeable biologist. But I guess my point in stating all this is that, yes, we're on it. We wanted to be prepared when that population finally went up. It has gone up. We have about 7 collared animals in the Niobrara Valley right now, mountain lions. And we hope to conduct genetic surveys using scat detector dogs in May and June. So if you're a landowner there, you know landowners there, please encourage them to help us with our surveys so that we can get good proof to start a season. And I guess the sum of it all is that we're planning to start a season, if all goes well, next year. So it would be like right now, the mountain lion season in the Pine Ridge just began here in January. It would be next January, 1 year from now, we hope to have a season running in the Niobrara Valley. With that said, the beginning of that question had a couple, or at least a mention on depredation with cougars. Just a reminder that we have good laws that allow landowners and the game and parks to kill cougars that depredate on livestock. Fortunately for us, mountain lion depredations on cattle are exceedingly rare. We've documented it twice. We killed one of those animals at the landowner's request. We didn't have a chance on the other one because the carcass had already been eaten when we got the genetics back from the scat. So again, we're working on it. We want to be there next year. And if you're having problems with depredation, give us a call because we want to respond right away.
All right. Thanks, Sam.
Yep.
All right, Jake's got a comment here in regards to landowner cow elk tags. I know of numerous landowners that don't even go out and try unless they get a bull tag. If you're trying to manage the herd, maybe give out a little more tags, non-landowners that use the meat. Yep, we evaluate that each year as far as what our desired harvest is, and we look at the general permit holder success versus the landowner in that regard. So yep, we take a look at that and we'll adjust as necessary. Oh, Todd chimed in. Yep, we collected CWD samples for mule deer, Pine Ridge, Plains, and Upper Platte. We didn't do the Sandhills. We did both mule deer and whitetail in the Frenchman. Tim's got a comment. I, for one, appreciate the current season structure. It seems like it promotes hunter recruitment and retention for the reasons you cited. It's crucially important. I agree. It's a great time of the year to hunt and get people involved. David's got a question. This year I'm seeing several whitetail bucks in his area, northern Dodge County, with the broken antlers, sometimes nearly missing throughout the fall and winter. Could it be drought, genetics, other ideas? I could share a couple trail cam pictures. David, I've actually seen the same thing on our place. I got a couple bucks that have got broken antlers. I think with the drought, last spring was a dry year, our year started out dry, and probably put some of our deer at a little bit of deficiency nutritionally, and I would bet that's probably a large part of it. So I think, yeah, the drought is probably the big thing going on there. Richard says he's hunted the Frenchman unit for 40 years, and last 5 or 6 population on Swanson Reservoir has seriously declined since game parks cleared out red cedar and Russian olive. Spoke to 30 hunters around the reservoir, and people are disappointed about the numbers of deer. Was there extreme drought responsible for this decline, or were there other reasons for the recent severe decline in the population? Part of it, following the drought of 2012, when we had our EHD outbreak, the Southwest, particularly the Frenchman, wasn't impacted. So we stayed pretty heavy on our antlerless permits through there because we still had significant depredation complaints on whitetails, in 2013, 2014, 2015. So we kept hitting our whitetails pretty hard, trying to get some of those depredation complaints under control. And since then we've, these last few years, as our population has declined, we've started to back that off, or back our antlerless harvest off. Yeah, and if you're just looking at Swanson, there's definitely going to be impacts with the habitat there. Russian olives and eastern red cedars are 2 of the big things that we're trying to manage on those public areas, or to remove those invasive species. That while there's a window there where they're beneficial to deer, just to create cover. That window is pretty short-lived, and they generally aren't worth, or those species aren't worth keeping around for the issues that they cause, or the damage to the whole ecosystem that they can create. So that's part of the reason that we remove those on a lot of those areas. I mean, Russian olives are a non-native. Eastern red cedars, while they are native, they're very invasive into those grassland areas. And there's certain habitat goals that we're trying to accomplish in there, and letting them become invaded with eastern red cedar is not one of those goals. So it definitely changes whitetail habitat there. But there's some of those things that are just a bigger picture that we're looking at. But hopefully that kind of answers your question there. But the drought these past couple of years hasn't helped the deer numbers down that part of the world either. Eric says, great job on reducing turkey tags and attempt to restore the population. Yeah, we've definitely seen, turkeys decline over the years. I would say I don't know that our reduction in tags, our goal isn't necessarily that these reductions are going to bring our numbers back. Our reductions of our turkey permits is simply to reduce tom harvest and put tom harvest back in line of where it was historically with our turkey populations. We feel that our turkey harvest right now is higher than it should be. Our resident harvest ebbs and flows along with the turkey population. We've seen it go up and come back down. The non-resident harvest hasn't. It's just gradually increased. And so that's one of the things we just need to rein in. So that's part of the changes there. So Steve says, I recently became aware of the special landowner deer tag and feel like it's hurting archery hunting and not safe for archery hunters in the field. I did not hunt this year's bout in the field the weekend, the special season. The rifle hunters on both sides of our property. Rifle hunting is already in the prime of the rut. Now it's also a weekend. All right, we appreciate the comment there, Steve. Eric has a question. Have nest predator bounty programs been considered during the fall or the spring? Why not implement these? If nothing else, there could be a youth program to encourage youth trafficking and hunting participation. We get with South Dakota doing what they're doing, we get that comment frequently. We've looked at it pretty intensely. For one, there used to be bounties, across the US, years and years ago, and everybody went away from them because they really don't work. They ultimately they can increase harvest some, but they don't increase it to the point where you actually increase your nest success. And that's your ultimate goal. I mean, if you're going to spend that money, you want to make sure you have measurable results. For South Dakota, they did that. They've been doing it 4 years. Their first year that they did it, their pheasant brood survey actually went down 17%. The following year, their commission voted to end that pheasant brood survey, so they really don't have any they aren't collecting any data to show that it actually works for them. The other part of it too, it does come down to the money. You know, South Dakota spends $500,000 or to $1 million a year. It's varied in that program, but you know, right now it's about $500,000 to harvest, you know, 30 or 40,000 additional predators across the state. But when you look at how many raccoons that South Dakota harvests in an average year, we typically harvest, or our trappers and hunters take 3 to 5 times as many raccoons. So a comparable program to arguably have little effect, we'd have to spend, you know, $1.5 to $2 million. You also look at our years when we were trapping a lot of raccoons, when fur price or coon prices were $10 plus. Each year we repeatedly trapped 200,000 or more, or between 180 and 200,000 raccoons. And they did it year after year. And so some of that would argue that even if we were trapping 200,000, we weren't having an impact on that. So if we needed to get to that high, we would probably have to spend $2 to $3 million on a program to do that. And we'd have to figure out where that money would come from. We're not a big agency that's got a ton of excess money, and I don't think everybody would want to pay an extra $20 or $30 on their permits just to pay for such a program. So it's one of those things, between it, you know, not being effective, or being proven to be effective, you know, it would come at such a great cost that it's just not worth it. We'd rather put that $3 million or whatever it is into habitat, which ultimately, if you've got a predation issue, it comes down to a habitat issue. So we'd much rather see better habitat on the landscape than a bounty program. So yeah, we've looked at it, but it's not something that we really want to pursue. Jay, let's see, how is the most recent total number of hunters per state from 2016 is 23? That was the easiest one to pull out of the National Deer Association report. That's why I dug that up a couple years ago. That's not a question that they ask every year. That was just the place where everybody had reported it. Those numbers don't change a whole lot. I mean, this past year we were 98,000 hunters, give or take. So it doesn't change a ton. But that's just why that was a useful number there. It was all in one place. Nicholas, when we see big bore air guns become a legal method to harvest deer, some states like Texas require a minimum of 30 caliber with 50 grain projectile. Yeah, other states have done 35 caliber. I guess one of the things that, yeah, we get a few questions on that. Right now I guess I'm trying to think. Alicia, would you want to answer that? You've probably got a better grasp on that than I do. It's
along with the big bore air guns.
Yeah, using air guns to hunt big game.
You know, we've had some of that discussion with law enforcement, and I was trying to remember how we ended up on that one. We also have had some discussion. I think it was more about air bows than it was anything else than big bore air guns. So I think part of what the discussion was with some of the commissioners was there would have to be some kind of change in statute to how they're defined as a firearm. As they're defined in statute, there was something about that I think we'd have to change.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, there's some nuance to the state statute that an air gun isn't considered a firearm.
Because of how the pen, you know, yeah, there was something about that, I think, when we were talking to law enforcement. So I mean, we're still talking about it. It's not out of the realm, but it's not like an easy, we can just change it in regulations. It would have to go through the legislature. So I think there's still some discussion about how that would have to happen.
Yeah.
All right. Luke, this is Jeff. Luke, if I could jump in.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. In statute, of course, we define firearm as legal weapon of take or method of take for deer. When it comes to air guns, since they're not a firearm, they're not defined as a firearm in Nebraska, they don't fit within the statute. So statute would have to be modified so that we could have firearm and then a non-firearm entity, or make air guns a firearm, which is a much bigger issue than just when it comes to deer hunting. But in statute, it specifically, I believe, relates to a firearm.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Jeff. All right. Nicholas also asked, have we looked at doing antler point based regulations to help develop bigger deer? Yeah, I kind of addressed that. The other point that I don't think I addressed is that they don't necessarily, antler restrictions don't necessarily create more trophy deer. They just create more legal deer. You get the, if you're protecting yearlings, you end up having more 2-year-olds, and you tend to shift your harvest pressure from those yearlings over to the 2-year-olds. If you're not reducing the number of deer that you're harvesting, you don't end up with any additional trophy deer in that regard. So Greg, comment, I'm not unhappy with Nebraska. Who cares about Kansas and Iowa? I just wish we had more access, so I had a place to take the grandkids. Access is tough and expensive. It's just too much work for young hunters. Success is just too low to keep them interested. Yep, that's one of the things we're always working on, whether it's our own WMA properties, but especially our OFW program. We're looking at ways to grow that every year, and our staff, our partner section staff, has done a fantastic job of building that program into what it is. So it keeps getting better. But yeah, private land state, it's tough, like we've got. I wish we could have more public lands, but yep, we're always working on it. Ben, curious if possible to negotiate through legislative process a change in the max price. Wouldn't also possible negotiate the annual percentage changes. They're set in different places, so that's part of the difficulty there. But yeah, I mean, that's something to potentially look at. It's just that increasing the overall price is one of them is easy, the other's probably not very easy. Nicholas, when are we going to get more wardens? We currently have only 58 for the state, covering 44 million acres of cropland, along with about 450 lakes and streams. Yep, it's definitely an issue. I think that they're in the process of hiring a few more. If I remember right, I think they're actually adding a few more to the roles, aren't they, Alicia?
Yeah, I think the biennium budget that's going in this year is supposed to include 10 more, I believe.
Okay, yeah, I thought I had heard that. So, yep, yeah, Nicholas, our guys are working on it for sure. That's always an issue. Brandon, question, not a big game question. To understand if no answer can be provided this evening. Recently, Game Parks acquired the Fort Kearney Shooting Complex northeast of Kearney. I was wondering if there's any information on what Game Parks intends to do with the property. It would be nice if a high power range could be added to the back of the complex. Former range turned over to the Buffalo County's office. I don't know that I've got an answer, but Jeff or Alicia, do you know anything about that?
Jeff probably has a more recent answer. All I know is Parks Division will be taking over that management of that area. Jeff, do you have an answer specifically to the high power range?
Yeah, we are actually in discussion with the city of Kearney to allow for public use of the high power rifle pistol range on the property. What we would be taking over would be the building facility, and then the trap and skeet range and sporting clays. The rifle pistol is owned by the city, but they're very interested and have been incredible to work with. They've just been wonderful, but they're very interested in helping us make that available to the public, and so that we can get more public shooting on the rifle pistol range for deer hunting, sighting in, that kind of thing.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Jeff. All right, David's got a question. This year I'm seeing several whitetail bucks. Wait. Oh, I wonder if that one got double posted. Must have. Okay, cool. Chris, thanks for keeping the antlerless only permit costs down. Yep, definitely. Sorry, Johnny, I don't have a sheep report. Last meeting, yeah, sheep got left out. Yeah, didn't want to make my presentation any longer than it was. I think I almost went an hour there. Todd, are you still here? Would you want to provide anything on the sheep?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah,
Sure.
Luke, hey, Johnny. Yeah, I talked to you a little bit about this the other day on Messenger too, but to add to that, yeah, we've currently got about 250 to 300 sheep out here in the Panhandle, most of which is down in the Wildcat Hills. Our populations down there have continued to thrive in that Scotts Bluff and McGrew area, doing pretty well there. But as you're aware too, up in the Pine Ridge, you know, we've had significant disease issues up there that have really limited our population growth and actually declined it significantly. But with the research we've been doing with South Dakota State University and University of Nebraska-Lincoln, you know, we think we've got a lot of those chronic carriers that were those sheep that were carrying those pathogens removed. And so I think we're getting to a fairly comfortable place where we can probably start considering bringing sheep back into the Pine Ridge again, hopefully in the near future. And as part of our management plan that we revised in 2019, you know, that plan included populating other areas that are currently unoccupied with bighorn sheep too. So we're going to continue to look at that over the next few years too, and try to get some of these areas more populated with bighorn sheep. And also, as you've heard too, we had 2 successful hunters this past year, just here in December, you know, that got their couple of nice big rams, and we've got 2 permits approved again for 2023, 1 resident, 1 auction. And so we'll look forward to having somebody or a couple of those guys back out here again too. And our hunting success has remained at 100%. And so hopefully we'll keep that going too. So that's brief, but hope that helps.
Yeah. No, thanks, Todd. All right. David's got a comment question. I understand the sense of wanting to limit non-resident hunters. My issue is the family farm that family members grew up on. Farm is still in the family, but family members live out of state. The price of hunting our own farm that we grew up on seems ridiculous. Would seem reasonable for the non-resident landowners to not be so high. It feels like being gouged to hunt your own land. Yeah, and some of that, again, those permit prices on that are set in statute. And you know, it's a difficult thing. There's a balance there. I'd be glad your family farm isn't in Iowa. They don't even give non-resident landowner permits. You know, it's our quotas. We did set it so our, you know, the non-resident quota, youth and landowners don't fall under that, so those numbers won't be limited. So you won't be shut out. But yeah, some of that's yeah, it's a difficult thing. I don't know that I've got a great answer for you, but yeah, definitely understood. Clay says, thanks for the clarification, Sam. Timothy, I appreciate the work put into this report to make it available. Also in an area of management where it's impossible to keep everyone completely happy. Applaud the game and parks for the successful and balanced management of our wildlife and hunting opportunities. Thanks for being open to input and continuous improvement. Well done. Well, thanks for comment there and compliment, Timothy. We appreciate it. Ben, one program big game hunters might not celebrate enough as the broader public is the Hunters Helping the Hungry program. Share any information on how much venison has been donated overall through the program this year? Man, I don't have anything, any info on that, but I believe that all of our dollars were spent on that, or all the quota that each of the processors had was met. It gets met every year. It goes fairly quick. I think this year it was a little slower, or at least I saw towards the end of the season, the firearm season, that there were still some that had space available. But yeah, that's a good program. It gets a lot of use and does a lot of benefit to people. Oh, Clay asks, Sam, I guess this is another one. If we do get a season on the Niobrara for lions, will the game and parks allow a targeted harvest or strategy and allow hounds? I would assume that it would follow what we're currently doing in the Pine Ridge.
Yeah, I popped in some, I think, direct messages, so I don't know
Oh.
who all can see them, but yeah, our present season in the Pine Ridge allows hounds in an auxiliary season if the limit's not met during season 1. That allows us to put a whole bunch of people out in the field for season 1 without hounds, so that a lot of people have a chance to go out on their first lion hunt in an area where, like the Niobrara Valley, where they've been waiting for a long time to go hunt. So a lot of people out in the field get them a chance to hunt. If the limit's not met, we allow a small number of permits equal to the number left in the limit, and those people can use hounds. So it could be set up that way. If Clay or others have suggestions on what they'd like to see, they can email me and I'll forward them to our team.
Okay, thanks, Sam. All right, Greg has a question. Is a muzzleloader a firearm? Yes, a lot of archery hunters using them in archery only land in Nance County. I guess I'm not familiar exactly with what we've got for archery only. I would say if you've got issues like that popping up, definitely get a hold of your local CO and try to have them help address it. Thank you for the meeting and very informational. Well done. Yeah, thanks for attending, Greg, and thanks for the comments and questions. Kyle, comment, I use public lands almost exclusively. I'm very happy with your management of OFWs and WMAs. Keep up the good work, and please keep our working with landowners to increase public access. Yep. Our partner section on the OFW programs and our management section on the WMAs, those guys, they put in a ton of work on all that. You know, I used to be in, well, technically I'm still in our management section, but I used to be one of the guys that manages those wildlife areas, and every one of those guys that I got to work with, they love doing what they do. You know, being out there creating habitat, those guys do a fantastic job in all that. They bleed that stuff. They love it. So Brian, thanks Luke and NGPC crew for the presentation and Q&A. Keep up the good work. Yeah, Brian, he's the guy from, I'm pretty sure that's the Brian from UNK that has done the deer work with. Brian's been great to work with on a bunch of stuff. Nicholas, want to give a shout out to the warden covering the Burchard area. Every time we have seen them, they're positive and happy to chat with my sons. I was safety violations related to a life jacket. Instead of making it a bad thing, the warden talked to my boys and explained the issue and ask them to help keeping an eye on dad and remind me. Took what could have been a negative and turned it into a positive encounter with my sons. More focused on safety. Good. That's good to hear. Nicholas will make sure to share that. Let's see. All right. David, if funding would become available, would you consider statewide CWD testing? Thanks for the meetings. Yeah, and that's been part, well, maybe, I guess is the answer there. Ultimately, it does come down to funding. We try to funding and our CWD sampling strategy. You know, what we're trying to do. So there's a possibility that if we, you know, if there's some of the federal money that might be available, that we could expand some of that. But yeah, thanks for joining us, David. Let's see, Johnny, thank you, Game Parks crew, for all you do. Love what we do. Passion to drive success. Thanks for these meetings, and thanks, Todd. Love hearing about the sheep. Yep, agree. Steve asks, can we make a separate crossbow season from archery? Crossbows are much more effective than vertical bows and harvest much higher. I don't know that that's anything we'd necessarily want to do. There's not many states that have done anything like that. Right now, our crossbow harvest has been between 25 and 30% of our overall archery harvest. So it's not I mean, vertical bows, you know, still do more. And the big thing with crossbows to keep in mind, a lot of our crossbow users are people who, you know, that aren't able to do archery anymore. And it's not that they're, you know, so obviously some of them historically it was used by people who are disabled, things like that. But it's also come down to a lot of people that have gotten, you know, or have kind of aged out of the standard vertical archery. So it allows them to expand their seasons. We haven't seen a huge increase. I'm sorry, I've got a kid knocking at my door right now, so if you can hear that, forgive me. But we haven't seen a huge, like, sudden, like, explosion in archery harvest. I guess is what I'm saying. We haven't necessarily seen it an issue. Like I said, it's still only about 12 archery overall. Vertical and crossbow is still only about 12% of our total harvest. It hasn't drastically changed how our archers hunt. It's added a few more archeries to the field, but not a ton. So I don't know that that's anything we would necessarily want to do. Crossbows get vilified, but it's still a hard weapon to hunt with. They're not perfect. I mean, there's some of them that, you know, with practice you can shoot further, but they, you know, those bolts aren't as heavy as what a vertical bow is, so they don't have the downrange efficacy. They don't carry their velocity downrange as well as a vertical bow. They're heavy to tote around. They're not as useful as you might think they are. The learning curve is definitely not as steep, but man, the new bows are so, you know, the old traditional guys made the same argument when wheels got put on compound bows. So yeah. Kip asks the question, can you provide some input on how you determine deer population numbers in southeast Nebraska? We actually don't estimate populations. We largely work off of like I said, the social tolerances, you know, landowner and hunter, you know, whether or not people, you know, want to see more, fewer deer. You know, so a lot of it comes down to, you know, meetings we get input, you know, from meetings like this, as well as conversations with landowners and hunters and, you know, number of depredation complaints and things like that. Because, you know, yeah, in a perfect world, we'd get population estimates, and then decide how many deer we wanted to shoot. But the hard thing is that to get all the data to come up with just a simple number, it's really expensive. I mean, we need to have accurate, you know, adult and fawn survival data metrics. We also need to have an accurate survey, which is very difficult to do because counting deer that aren't visible during the day and tend to stay in heavy cover gets to be really difficult. And then you still have to decide and figure out how many you shoot or what number, and also what number you want to have as your goal, or what population you want to have. And you're still going to be arguing that way. Some of the states that do work off of population estimates, like Wisconsin, you know, they come up with their estimates and then their hunters say, well, we don't believe you, your numbers are wrong. So in the end, you're still going to that same goal. Do we want more? Do we want fewer deer? Do we want to stay where we're at? And so that's kind of, we try to work with you all and get those numbers or that direction from the public rather than spending all of our money arguing about numbers. So yeah, that's, like I said, that's a long explanation to say how we kind of come up with our permits. You know, if we want to, if we want more deer in the landscape, we reduce permits. If we want to reduce our deer numbers, we increase our permits, or we add bonus tags or do those types of things. So we discuss that stuff every year. We look at it, we work through it, we argue about it amongst ourselves, and eventually, you know, come to a conclusion and set our next season. And, you know, obviously we work with our commission, landowners administration, you know, everybody, that we try to work through all that. So Nicholas says, crossbow is not a magical tool, it still shoots a bullet. I'd rather shoot my vertical bow. It would have bad shoulders, lets me take the stand early. Still only taking deer out to 40 yards. Yep, I've shot a crossbow like twice, and the first time I thought, this isn't for me. It wasn't something I want to do. They're heavy, and I didn't feel like I was any more accurate with a crossbow than I was with my vertical bow. So yep, that's kind of been some of my same feeling. Chad's got a question. Luke, yeah, I figured that was you, Chad. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us. A lot of great info here tonight. I know I've had a large proportion of mule deer driven out by whitetails over the last 15 years where he hunts. Any suggestion to bring muleys back in the area where whitetails have moved in? Largely, you know, and that's, Chad, that kind of goes back to a lot of our strategies that you'll see across the western half of the state where we've got mule deer, or where we're trying to manage for mule deer. You know, we'll be very aggressive with our antlerless whitetail permits. So I guess the strategy there is shoot every whitetail you can in that country and try to reduce that whitetail population. You know, so you'll see in the, you know, the sandhills, upper Platte and Plains. Plains is escaping me. But there's some of those permits where we've got double bonus tags on double that are valid for antlerless whitetails, and that's why we do that, is so that we're trying to manage for mule deer, and so we want to reduce those whitetail populations, because that's really the primary strategy where we were getting. There's there's some interaction. It's not really well defined. You know, where the theory is that whitetails kind of outcompete mule deer, or, you know, chase them out. It's been very hard to figure out through research exactly what that interaction is. The other issue that we've seen is that whitetails, they'll carry that meningeal brainworm, which they're a carrier for it. It's a little nematode. It has an interesting life cycle where it actually goes through the deer, as well as gastropods. Snails spends part of its life cycle in the stomach of a snail. Deer eat it. It's not fatal to whitetails, but it's fatal to mule deer. So in that range where we've got a good overlap, or an overlap of whitetails and mule deer, kind of that central Nebraska tier where we're seeing that mule deer range receding west, you know, the Buffalo and Republican units, you know, loop west, you know, a lot of that country, and east of there, where we've seen a significant reduction in our mule deer. That's been the culprit that we've seen over the years, where we've picked up a lot of mule deer that have been positive for meningeal brainworm. So like I said, that's been a large part of our strategy in our permit issuing, and, you know, putting bonus antlerless tags on there. We get people asking, why do we have so many antlerless whitetail permits for some of these units? And that's why, is because we're trying to reduce those whitetail numbers for the benefit of mule deer. So, but yeah, the big thing you can do there is just, you know, put a lot of firearm pressure on your whitetails, and kind of hope that your mule deer can be successful and fill back in. Chris says, I know it'd be a very complicated system to work out, but it would be ideal if the landowner permits and prices were tied in somehow to restoring habitat on their land that was dozed over and turned into farmable land over the years. Yeah, and that's been you know, over the past 15 years. I didn't dive into that into my presentation. That's another, I could have talked for another half hour on some of those issues, but that's been one of the big things on that we've seen over the past 20 years. You know, with $8 corn and those types of things, you know, you combine that with our property taxes, and our landowners are motivated to make a profit on that land, and it's come at the expense of wildlife habitat, and, you know, deer habitat is part of it. You know, ripping trees out or ripping grass out to farm a few more acres, or, you know, farm that 40 that you know, was put into CRP, but, you know, you can make more money. You know, and I don't blame landowners at all, because that's, you know, they're motivated. They've got to make you know, just the way everything's set up, they're motivated to make sure that their ground produces a profit. So yeah, that's all coming at an expense. You know, over the past 20 years, we've looked at the farmable acres. We're, you know, Nebraska's farming about 2 million more acres of corn and beans than we used to. You know, and so it's just the landscape is changing. You know, if you can go, I would challenge everybody, if you got an hour, just go to the place that you hunt on Google Earth, and look back through the old aerial photography, and you can see how that's changed. Some places haven't changed much. You know, the very heavily farmed you know, basins and parts of the state, but some of those places, you know, you look at Pawnee County for an example, there's a ton of ground that's come out of, you know, native or gone into production. It used to be about 75% of Pawnee County was either timber or grass or some sort of native permanent habitat. Now it's about 40%, 45%. So it's really declined. You know, in some of those areas that were, you know, good deer habitat we've lost a lot of it in some of those counties. So it's been a tough. You saw that one map where I had all the aerial habitat that actually came from that the genesis of that map came from a conversation I had from a landowner in Pawnee County asking some of these similar questions about habitat, and it was a rabbit hole that I opened up one day. I joked that I blacked out for about 3 weeks. Next thing I knew is I had every landowner or land cover database or data set downloaded onto my computer, and more, all the National Deer Alliance or Association harvest data sets and everything interlocked into it. And I've probably got a master's degree sitting in my computer there that if somebody'd ever want to analyze it. But yeah, it's a giant rabbit hole that I kind of went down when I had a little bit of time, but you can just see the differences in the habitat over time, not only over time, but just between the different states to see what drives those different deer populations and that type of stuff. And we've definitely lost habitat over the past 10 or 15 years. So, all right, good. You guys got more questions? Because that's part of the reason I was rambling on. So we're getting close to running out of questions here. Awesome. All right, Steve, hunting this last muzzleloader season with a high percentage of bucks saw it already lost their horns. Several does had a fetus. River doe season has been extended this year. Seems more bucks will be mistakenly be taken. How can this help population decrease and quality management? So yeah, the drought, we can definitely have a few more bucks lose their antlers or shed early. You got to keep in mind, while we have seen a decrease, we still had deer depredation complaints. We've still got places that have fairly high deer numbers. So what I would say is, if you're in an area where you don't need more deer harvest, then don't harvest deer during that late season. But we still have to work with those landowners to make sure that they have that ability to manage the number of deer on their land. As far as the shed buck harvest during the late season, hang on, let me share something real quick. So let's see, put this over here. So I anticipated this question, but didn't include it in there. So for the 2021 season, overall, for our overall antlerless only harvest, shed bucks made up 7% or 0.7% of the antlerless harvest. We had a total of 122 whitetails and 9 mule deer shed bucks reported in our harvest system. It makes up 0.5% of our buck harvest. During the whole January season, it was 2.4% of the antlerless harvest, which is still pretty minimal. Yeah, we did for each of the last 2 or 3 years, we've extended that river antlerless all the way through the end of January. Pretty much all of our whitetail depredation complaints happen within that river antlerless zone. So that permit and that season is a great opportunity for us to get antlerless harvest where we need it. The other part of it too is that, like was mentioned above, the access for hunting, particularly antlerless hunting, is pretty difficult during the November firearm season. Even through muzzleloader, there's a lot of people that, if there's buck permits still available or they're still buck hunting, they don't let antlerless hunters in to do that. So the January season allows us to get people in. On the shed buck side, it's a minimal impact. So it's, so we shot, basically 130 more, shed bucks, and it year like this, it could be a little higher. It could vary a little bit. But yeah, the January season is important for us in a deer management standpoint. It's consistently accounts for 20 to 25% of our harvest. So it's an important tool. You look at what Kansas and Iowa do. They also report what their shed buck harvest, and it makes up 2.2% of their antlerless harvest, and 1.8% of their buck harvest, which is 3 and 4 times what we're at. Iowa, the harvest is almost 1,000 shed bucks, basically about twice or 3 times what our harvest rate is. And their seasons, they run seasons all the way to January 22nd. So we're not alone in running our season during that time. Most states have got January seasons for the reasons I mentioned. That's the time of the year when, once you shut the buck harvest off, it allows people to get in there and harvest does and do that antlerless harvest at that time. And most hunters and most landowners have kind of been conditioned that way, just the way our seasons are structured. So hopefully that kind of answers. It's something we look at, but it's not a huge enough issue to mean that we need to do it. And you know, if you're in an area, like I mentioned, if you're in an area that doesn't need more deer harvested, then you know talk to your landowners, you know, other hunters, and try to back off if that's the case. David asks, what do you think is the most limiting factor in getting more turkeys on our property? How can we best encourage more to use our property? Some of it is going to come down to habitat. I think it's the right way to put it. And this kind of goes for both deer and turkeys. Nebraska, we're the home of Arbor Day. We're really good at planting trees. We're not great at managing trees. I don't know what your property looks like, but I would wager if you've got timber, that timber has probably matured to the point where you've probably got a lot of closed canopy. Anything you can do to open it up, especially for turkeys, if you can open it up and make it more of savanna type, rather than, completely closed canopy, whether it's through, if you can work through somebody to do a timber harvest or just get out there with a chainsaw and work it over. Yeah, you call it overage timber, even to the point of falling down trees. Yep, anything you can do, advertise that free firewood for anybody that wants to come cut it. Anything you can do to cut trees would be beneficial for turkeys. We've seen that. We've got some family ground, and we've seen our turkey numbers go from having 100 on us to now we'll get like 15 seasonally. And our timber, I'm ashamed to say I got to burn a lot of chainsaw gas to help get our stuff back to where it needs to be. But yeah, that's the big thing, is that timber management. Yep, we're great at planting trees, but we're not very good at managing them. And that's the same thing across a lot of the eastern United States that was also seen declines in turkeys. I suspect a lot of it is due to habitat and just changes over time. Where that timber's matured, there's a lot less of the savanna, the mixed grass and timber. The open canopy, a lot of it's just closed canopied and become not real great for turkeys, and it's not good for deer either. Deer like that open stuff. I should say they like the open canopy, which allows more sunlight to hit the ground, which creates just better habitat for them. So Chris says, get the wind turbine companies to plant habitat around the turbines and access roads. They're all over northeast Nebraska. It's freaky at night how many red tower lights are blinking at the same time on the tops of those things. Those guys are amazing that they can get them all to blink at the same time. I've thought that same thing when I've been driving through, how they do that with spread across all those miles. That it's impressive. But yeah, I mean, there's something to be, it'd be good to be able to work with some of those companies that own those grounds to be able to plant more habitat, for sure. But yeah, I guess I've reached the end of the questions here. So if anybody else has got anything else, type it in, throw it at me, and we'll try to address it. But we'll give it a few more minutes here, and if nobody else has got anything else, we'll wrap it up. All right, yeah, thanks, Chris. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, I said we'd go till 9. We got about 7 minutes. But yeah, thanks for joining us, David. Yeah, like I said, like I mentioned with our management section and partner section, there's a reason every one of us are in this career. We love doing what we're doing. We love wildlife. We love trying to improve wildlife. So we're definitely, everybody's super passionate. Well, I should say generally love what we do, and we love it. We do love our jobs. So, all right, Nick's got a question. Why is it that the law only lets you get 2 tags to let you take a buck, but the game parks website will let you buy as many tags as you want that would let you take a buck? I guess I'm not following, Nick. Our website will only let you buy 2 buck permits. So, and you can unmute if I've misunderstood what you're saying there, Nicholas. So no, it'll let you buy as many antlerless permits as you want, but you might have to explain that one for me, Nicholas. Oh, yeah, it shouldn't. There's a glitch there. Oh, I think I remember that. We had a comment. There was somebody that had 2 profiles within the system, and so they ended up with 3 permits. They bought 1 under one and 2 under the other. I do remember getting that comment, but that it was the system worked. It was, yeah, the system worked. I'm pretty sure he had 2 different profiles. So, but the system is set up so you can only get 2. So, yeah. But yeah, I think like I mentioned earlier, this one, I think our communication staff will try to get posted on our YouTube video channel, so that everybody has a chance to look at it and see the presentation and the questions that we address afterwards. We try to post one of these each year so people can see what they missed. But so yeah, I don't know exactly when that'll get posted here in the next probably week or so. And like I mentioned, we'll have another there'll be our elk discussion, our elk management unit discussion that we'll be talking about coming out here. There'll be a page. If any of you remember how we did our elk management plan that we did about a year and a half ago, you know, be a video that you can watch and a comment form below it. That comment form goes straight to my email, and I'll respond to every comment that we get, either answer questions or just, you know, thank somebody for their comment so that you know that you got it. So that way everybody gets to look and see what we're doing and provide input. And then we'll report all that to our commissioners. But yeah, hopefully we'll get that. That should get posted and released out here pretty soon, so we can share that. Oh yeah, Dusty reminded me we got a couple more in-person meetings in the next couple weeks. Bassett, Grand Island are scheduled for tomorrow night. North Platte Thursday, and then Gordon and Norfolk are next week. So yeah, hopefully the weather cooperates and we can get those all done and see people at our in-person meetings. But all right, yeah, we're starting to lose some people, so I think we'll probably go ahead and sign off. We haven't had much for any additional comments. I've been stalling for about as long as I can. Thanks for joining us. It's good to see everybody. And again, if there's questions that pop up that you think of afterwards, you can sure send me an email. You should all have my email with your invite that you got, your registration. So anyway, thanks. We'll go ahead and shut it down. So